All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to untangle those systems that, well, kind of make the world tick, you know? We're talking political, economic, and legal environments. The stuff that really shapes how countries operate and, let's be real, makes a huge impact on global businesses.
We've got excerpts from some heavy-duty academic texts on global business and management, but don't worry, we'll break it down for you.
It's all about getting those rules of the game, like the institutions that are different all over the world. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a better grasp on these systems.
You'll see how they really impact success in international business.
And hey, maybe even understand those global news headlines a bit better, too.
Right. It all starts with these things called institutions, and they're often kind of overlooked, I think.
Yeah, but they're really the backbone of global commerce when you think about it.
It's true. Imagine trying to launch a new product in a country where, let's say, patent laws are like barely enforced, you know?
Well,
All your hard work, all that innovation could just be copied overnight. Poof, gone.
exactly.
That's why institutions are so crucial, you know, both the formal ones, the laws, and the informal ones,
Yeah.
like ethical norms.
Like the ethical norms, the culture,
They bring stability and predictability, which ultimately makes it easier and much safer to do business across borders.
for sure. Without them, things can get messy and fast.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say you're trying to, I don't know, negotiate a major contract in a country where corruption is rampant.
Ooh, yeah.
Suddenly, you might be facing unexpected demands, threats even,
Yeah,
which could totally derail the deal.
absolutely.
That's why understanding these systems is so important, you know,
Yeah.
about reducing risks,
Right.
making smart decisions.
It's kind of like having a roadmap, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't just set off on a road trip without knowing the terrain, would you?
No way.
Exactly.
All right. So let's dive into that first layer. We'll call it political systems, how a country is governed.
Okay, so we've got this, like, spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Democracy on one end and totalitarianism on the other. But, I mean, it's not as black and white as that, right?
Not at all. I mean, democracies can have totally different electoral processes.
Right.
And some might be more prone to, like, political instability or gridlock. And then on the other side, you got totalitarian regimes, and they come in different forms, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Communist, theocratic,
Yeah.
even tribal,
Wow.
each with its own kind of unique characteristics and implications for businesses.
Okay, so how does all this political stuff actually translate into real business decisions, you know? Like, what does that look like?
Okay, well, let's say you're a company and you're thinking about investing in a country that has a history of sudden policy changes. You need to really carefully weigh those political risks.
Absolutely.
Is there a chance the government might, just nationalize your whole industry?
Oh, right.
Are there strong property rights protections? That's a big one.
Yeah, that's huge. Or what if you're entering a market where those political connections are key to even getting permits and licenses?
Oh, yeah.
It just adds this whole other layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Understanding the political dynamics of a country helps you to anticipate those potential challenges.
Right.
And ultimately make more informed choices.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've got that political framework, but then how does the actual business environment operate within that system?
Yeah.
That's where those economic systems come in, right?
Absolutely. This is all about, how a country's resources are actually allocated
Yeah.
and how businesses function within that whole system.
We've got market economies, where it's all about supply and demand, and then there are command economies, where the government makes all the calls.
Right.
But honestly, most countries kind of fall somewhere in between, right?
Yeah.
Forming what we call mixed economies.
Yeah. It's that mix.
It's a mix.
Economy. And even among those market economies, there are huge differences.
Oh, totally.
I mean, take Germany and the U.S. They're both, market-based, but Germany has a much stronger emphasis on those, like, social partnerships,
Right.
government involvement in business decisions.
So a company that's used to operating in a very, like, hands-off environment,
Yeah.
free market kind of thing, they're going to need to adjust their strategies when they're entering a market like Germany.
Exactly. It's all about understanding those nuances
Yeah.
and adapting your approach.
Got it. All right, so we've covered the political, we've covered the economic. Now let's talk about the legal systems that underpin it all.
All right, so legal systems, they're all about the rules and processes, the things that govern behavior, the things that resolve disputes. And this is where it gets really interesting, especially for international businesses.
Because a contract signed in one country, I mean, that might not carry the same weight in another, right?
Exactly. And we have three main types, okay? We've got common law, civil law, and religious law. Common law relies heavily on precedent. This means that, past court decisions actually influence future rulings. Then you've got civil law. It's based on those codified laws.
Right.
And then religious law, well, the name kind of says it all.
Yeah.
It draws its principles from those religious texts and interpretations.
So let's say you're a tech company, right? And you're expanding into a country with a civil law system. You might find that the whole legal framework around intellectual property, it's just totally different from what you're used to.
Absolutely. And understanding those differences, that is crucial for protecting your assets and navigating potential disputes.
So it's almost like speaking a different language, even though you're both using the same words.
Yeah, in a way.
Right.
And just like you wouldn't, walk into a business negotiation without a translator.
Right.
You shouldn't enter a new market without a thorough understanding of its legal system.
That's such a good point. Now, within these legal systems, there are some kind of specific areas that international businesses really need to keep an eye on. Let's start with property rights, which basically define who owns what and how those assets can be used.
Yeah, strong property rights, they really encourage investment. If you know your factory or even your intellectual property is protected by the law, you're more likely to invest in that country.
But if those property rights are weak or they're inconsistently enforced,
it creates a huge risk for businesses.
It does. I mean, imagine pouring millions into building a new facility, only to have it seized by the government without, due process.
Oh, yeah. Nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. And it happens,
Yeah.
more often than you'd think. Then there's the whole issue of intellectual property, which is especially crucial for businesses in innovative industries.
Yeah.
Think pharmaceuticals, developing new drugs, or tech companies, creating groundbreaking software. They need to be able to protect those inventions through patents, copyrights, trademarks.
They do. But enforcing those rights can be a real challenge, especially in countries where, counterfeiting and piracy are just rampant.
It's a constant battle, isn't it?
It is. Companies need to be vigilant about protecting their intellectual property. But, they also need to be realistic about the level of enforcement they can expect in different markets.
That's true. And then there's that whole area of product safety and liability.
Oh, yeah.
Different countries have different standards for what's considered safe, and the consequences, they can vary widely if you're selling faulty products.
Yeah. This can create some, tricky ethical dilemmas for multinational companies,
Oh, yeah.
Do you adhere to those highest global standards, even if it means your product's going to be more expensive in certain markets? Or do you adjust to meet local regulations, even if it potentially means compromising on safety a bit?
It's a tough balancing act.
It is.
And then, of course, there's corporate governance, which is all about how companies are, structured and managed.
Right. And different systems offer varying levels of protection, for shareholders and other stakeholders. In some countries, minority shareholders have very little recourse if they feel like the company is being mismanaged.
Yeah. So understanding corporate governance can give you some really good insights into a company's level of transparency, their accountability.
Oh, yeah.
It can help you assess the potential risks of doing business with them.
Absolutely. It's all about due diligence. You need to understand those rules of the game, the players involved, the potential pitfalls.
Right.
Before you make any major moves.
Okay. So we've covered a lot here. We've talked political systems, economic systems, legal systems. But how do we actually measure a country's economic development? How do we know if a country is on the right track?
Right. So one common metric is that, gross national income, the GNI per capita.
Okay.
Gives you a rough idea of a country's average income level.
But it's not perfect. Right. Because it doesn't consider the cost of living.
Right.
A dollar can go a lot further in some countries than in others.
Yeah, exactly. That's where that purchasing power parity comes in, the PCP.
Right.
It adjusts for those cost of living differences. So it gives you a more accurate picture of how far your money will actually go in a particular country.
So if you're comparing, living standards across different countries, PPP is a much more useful metric than just looking at raw GNI per capita.
Absolutely. But there are other perspectives on measuring development, too.
Oh, okay.
Some economists argue that we should be focused on expanded people's capabilities and opportunities, not just looking at their income levels.
Okay.
This is where the work of, Amartya Sen comes in.
Oh, right.
He argues that development should be about creating a society where people have the freedom and the resources to live fulfilling lives.
Yeah.
Regardless of their income.
So it's not just about economic growth. It's about human development.
Exactly. And that's a really crucial consideration for businesses, too.
That's true.
If you're operating in a country where a big chunk of the population doesn't have, basic education or healthcare.
Yeah. It's going to impact your workforce,
right?
Your consumer base, the overall stability of that market.
So sustainable business success is intertwined with kind of broader societal development.
Yeah, it's not just about maximizing profits.
Right.
It's about contributing to a more equitable and prosperous world.
Absolutely. And that brings us to, I think, a pretty fascinating question. What drives economic success? What factors contribute to a country's ability to create wealth and improve living standards for its citizens?
It's a big one.
It is a big one. I mean, is it all about natural resources?
Yeah.
Or is it more about human capital, innovation, and strong institutions?
That is a complex question, no easy answers.
Right.
But one thing that is very clear from the research is that institutions, they play a pivotal role.
Absolutely. Our sources highlight the work of, Peng and Meyer. They argue that those strong market-supporting institutions, they're really the foundation of economic success. They reduce those transaction costs. They ensure contracts are actually enforced. They protect property rights. They create a level playing field where businesses can compete fairly. Investors can feel confident about putting their money to work.
So it's not just about having a good idea or having access to capital. It's about having that stable and predictable environment where those ideas can flourish and that capital can be deployed effectively.
That's it. And that's why understanding these institutions, the political, the economic, the legal frameworks, all that, it's so crucial for anyone operating on that international stage.
It's more than just knowing the rules. It's about understanding how those rules came to be, how they're enforced, and how they impact business decisions every single day.
It's about seeing that big picture, understanding that complex interplay of forces that really shape that global marketplace.
It is. It's fascinating. It's like all these systems are, so intertwined, like threads in a tapestry. And if one thread's kind of weak, the whole thing could unravel.
Oh, that's a great analogy. And it's important to remember that tapestry is always like evolving.
Right.
What worked in the past might not work in the future.
Oh, sure.
Take China, for example.
Yeah, good point.
They've gone through this huge transition from a, closed, centrally planned economy to a more market-oriented system.
Right.
It's created both like immense opportunities and complex challenges for businesses.
Yeah, it's like trying to hit a moving target, isn't it?
It is.
You got to be adaptable, ready to adjust your strategies as that landscape shifts.
Exactly. And that's why understanding these institutional frameworks is so vital. It gives you the tools to, anticipate those shifts, assess those risks, and make informed decisions.
Right.
In this ever-changing global marketplace.
Okay, so for our listeners who are, kind of diving into the world of international business, what are some key takeaways? What are the most important things to keep in mind when they're navigating these like complex environments?
All right, so first and foremost, thorough research.
Yeah.
Before you venture into any new market, understand its political system.
Okay.
Is it a stable democracy?
Right.
One with predictable policies? Or are there risks of sudden shifts in power, regulations, things like that?
It's like, I don't know, checking the weather forecast before you head out on a journey.
Right. You don't want to get caught in a political storm unprepared.
Exactly. Next, dive into the economic system.
Okay.
Is it a free market where supply and demand reigns supreme?
Right.
A command economy with heavy government control?
Right.
Or is it somewhere in between? A mixed system.
Right.
Understanding this will inform your approach to, things like pricing, marketing, even hiring.
Those are all huge, And of course, the legal system. Don't forget about that.
Yeah.
It's crucial to understand how contracts are enforced, how intellectual property is protected, what the regulations are for your specific industry.
Absolutely.
And don't underestimate the importance of cultural awareness.
Oh, that's huge.
What might be considered, acceptable business practice in one country could be totally offensive, even illegal in another.
Right.
Gift-giving etiquette, negotiation styles, communication nuances, all these things can make or break a deal.
That's so true. It's not just about knowing the rules. It's about understanding that cultural context.
Absolutely. And remember, these systems, they're dynamic.
Yeah.
Stay informed about, political developments, economic trends, legal changes in your target markets.
Yeah.
Flexibility and adaptability, those are your greatest assets in the global arena.
This deep dive has been, incredibly insightful, but it's also made me realize how much more there is to learn. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Every layer reveals new complexity.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a continuous journey of discovery.
It is.
And the more you learn, the better equipped you'll be to, navigate the challenges and seize the opportunities in that global marketplace.
This episode's really driven home the importance of institutions in shaping that global business environment. I mean, they're not just like abstract concepts.
Yeah.
They're the very foundation upon which international trade and commerce are built.
And as we've seen, understanding these systems, their nuances and their interconnectedness, it's absolutely paramount for businesses aiming for success on that global scale.
Right.
It's not just about, maximizing profits.
Right.
It's about operating responsibly, ethically, sustainably, in a complex and interconnected world.
Absolutely. This deep dive has given our listeners a solid framework for understanding the political, the economic, and the legal environments, the things that shape that global business landscape. But as we've said, I mean, this is just the beginning. It's up to each of you to continue exploring, learn, and adapt into this, ever-evolving world.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
Especially in this dynamic realm of international business.
For sure.
Stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
Okay, so we've looked at these systems like separate pieces.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the real magic happens when we kind of zoom out and see how they all work together, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like this big ecosystem.
Right.
Where everything kind of influences everything else.
Totally.
Like a change in the political scene can trigger economic reforms.
Right.
Which then forces changes to the legal stuff.
Yeah. It's all connected.
It's a constant dance.
It is. It really is. And that kind of brings us to a really interesting question for our listeners, I think. Do certain combos of political, economic, and legal systems, do they make a country more likely to be successful economically?
It's a question that's, been bugging economists and political scientists for ages.
For sure.
Do democracies with free markets and strong legal systems, do they always win out? Or are there exceptions to the rule?
I mean, think about the Nordic countries.
Yeah. Great example.
They've got this amazing mix of democratic socialism, free market principles, and those super strong social safety nets.
And they do really well.
They do. It's kind of challenging those traditional ideas about the best model for economic success,
It really does. And it kind of underlines how important context is.
Right.
What works in one country might not work in another.
Yeah.
Because of those cultural factors, historical stuff, all those other things that make places unique.
So no one-size-fits-all solution.
Nope, not at all.
But by studying these different models, understanding what works, what doesn't, we can at least get some clues about what makes sustainable economic growth and a good quality of life for people.
Yeah, it's about spotting patterns.
Right.
Noticing best practices and then, adapting those lessons to different places.
It's about being smart and informed.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with the complexity of global business.
Absolutely.
Well, we've given you the tools, the basic framework to start exploring all of these systems on your own.
You've got this.
Now it's your turn. Keep digging.
Yeah, keep asking those questions. Keep learning.
The world's your classroom.
It really is. Every news headline, every business deal, all those global events.
Yeah.
They're chances to use what you've learned.
Right.
To understand even more.
So, stay curious out there. Stay engaged. Keep diving deep into this amazing world of international business. Until next time, everyone.
See you later.